Hey, Chaplain Scott here. I'm rolling back to Jacksonville from Miami for a couple of days to scout out some property to plant a new chapel. And I want to talk to you about some things that happened while I was down there. Had a big falling out with a good friend of mine, another chaplain, and it's over the nature of the gospel. So I just wanted to make a quick video and explain what the gospel is, because it got messed up along the way. It got messed up when the church and the Roman Empire merged, starting in 325 with Emperor Constantine, the political bishops, and Constantine. They got together. They started the first church council, the council at Nicaea. They made some statements, and then they started punishing other Christians based on whether or not they follow their authoritative rule. And the first one was okay. I think there's wide agreement on the first one. I think there's wide agreement on the second, the third, and the fourth one. It was the fifth one where they really started to go off the rails. And it was the fifth one where they outlawed the gospel completely. They condemned early church fathers like Origen. They condemned the writings, the historical Christian belief that they had believed for the first 500 years was now illegal. You were no longer allowed to believe in the universal restoration of all things. You were not allowed to believe that Jesus Christ died for the sins of the whole world. You're not allowed to believe that. He died for some of the sins of the world, or if he did die for the sins of the whole world, it didn't actually apply to you. It only applies to you if they give it to you through what is now, the political church controlled by the Roman Empire, which was like the most wicked empire. I mean, literally, if you were the Roman emperor back then, your job was literally to kill people. That's how they ruled. They ruled by fear. Jesus was crucified back then. And the only reason that they used crucifixion, quite honestly, the only reason that they used crucifixion is they could not think of anything worse. That was the worst way to kill somebody that they could come up with. It was excruciating, it was long, it was a slow death, it was public, it was humiliating, and it told everybody else, don't mess with Rome. And that's why they crucified people. And Jesus wasn't special. They crucified people by the thousands. There are accounts in history where they crucified whole towns. That was the Roman Empire. It was ruled by power, fear, threat, and that was the emperor's job, to maintain order in a brutal world. And that is the world that Jesus came into. And the reason he came into the world, to upend that brutality, the brutality of the world that existed, that Jesus entered into, is nothing like the world of today. And I know we got our social justice warriors out there, and they are making a difference in many ways, and they're concerned, they're plugged in. But the injustice that we have in our country, in our society right now, is nothing like the injustices that Jesus stepped into and himself became a victim of. And so Jesus stepped into this brutal world. They crucified him. And of course, 3 days, they buried him. They put him behind a rock. They put Roman soldiers to guard the rock. 3 days later, something miraculous happened. This heavy rock rolled away. The Roman soldiers were like, oh my gosh. No new bodies were made, which of course would have if they stole the body, because the Roman soldiers would have fought to the death. They're not stealing the body from a Roman centurion. They kill people for a living. They would definitely be killing you if you're trying to steal the body that they're in charge of protecting and guiding. So he rose from the dead and changed the world. And the world that we live in now is like, really, love your neighbor as yourself is a universal value. Excuse me. And you're not really going to go anywhere and put that out there, and people are going to be like, no, you should not love your neighbor as yourself. Let's go back to dog eat dog. That's the world we want. Nobody wants to live in a dog eat dog world. Everybody wants to love your neighbor as yourself. And while we're not 100% there yet, we have come so far from the world that Jesus came into. And it is because Jesus introduced a new dynamic when he came. Not just a new philosophy. He didn't even invent that philosophy. Others had said that philosophy, but it didn't have the power that it had after Jesus. And what was that power? That power was that literally he wiped the slate clean for all of humanity. All the sins, all the wrongdoing, all the records, everything that had ever been done, past, present, future, wiped clean. There's nothing against mankind on God's behalf. God is not holding sins against man anymore. He's not keeping records of it. He's not holding it against you. He's not upset by it. He's not putting guilt on you. He's not threatening you with punishment. He's certainly not going to throw you into hell and torture you. That was a pagan idea that just entered in. We'll cover that some other time. But literally, Jesus Christ wiped away the sins of the entire world. He died for the sins of the entire world. And that is the gospel. And that is what the church taught and believed. And that is why it spread so rapidly for the first few hundred years. Excuse me. Until they got political. And the political bishops merged with Rome under Emperor Constantine. And they just maintained this relationship, which was pretty good for the political bishops, quite honestly, because some of the emperors before these guys, they tortured Christians. I mean, it's historical record. Literally, Nero was vicious. He used to not only kill Christians, he would put them in his garden, set them on fire, and use them as torches to light up his garden at night. Vicious, brutal world, and Christians were a good, easy target because they were basically pacifists. They didn't fight back. Excuse me. But anyway, so the political bishops by 325 made a deal. Constantine oversaw it, smooth operator there, and they got suckered into a bad relationship with Rome. And interestingly, Constantine was the first head of the church, Pontifex Maximus, the chief pontiff. A guy who murders people for a living was the chief pontiff, the chief priest, the chief religious leader. He was the head of the religion in the Roman Empire, and his job was literally to kill people by that's how he ruled. Kill people, fear, terror, vicious. I mean, that he was the head of the church after that point. And then, of course, later they started having popes and things like this. And thank goodness that the church has reformed largely. Love our current pope who understands and is restoring the idea of universal restoration of all things. God does not torture his children in hell. That is a horrible, horrible threat of Rome that is mixed up with politics. But by the Fifth Church Council under Emperor Justinian, they outlawed the idea that Jesus wiped the slate clean, that all the sins are forgiven, and the problem is not with God. Now the problem is down here, and we just got to fix the problems down here. The problem is not that God is holding things against us. The problem is that we are holding things against us. The guilt and the shame and the hostility and the regret and the fear and all these kind of things, that is the problem that needs to be solved now. It's not with God. God is fine. God is okay. God is love. He has fixed all that. The problem is right down here, that we need to find not separation. It's not separation with God. We have union with God. We need to step into that union. It's separation from our fellow man. It's separation from ourselves. It is the negative emotions, the guilt, the shame, the fear, the hostility, all of this stuff that's going on in our mind that needs to be healed and cured and fixed. And that is what the gospel message does. It's not some future thing for heaven. Everyone goes to heaven. He fixed all that. It's a flesh situation that is the one that's being tormented right now. The spirit is fine. Spirit goes back to God. It's the fleshly experience right here, right now on planet Earth that is the problem that we have. And that is the problem that the gospel solves, because it gives us assurance of the love, acceptance, and forgiveness of God. And it was given to us freely because that's who God is. That's what God is. That's what God would do. God would solve that problem, and God is solving that problem. And he's solving it in a way that does not violate your cooperation, does not violate your free will. He's giving you the power, and he's given all of us the power to solve all of your problems, because all of our problems exist only in our own mind, not outside of our mind. And the gospel heals that. First of all, it gives us the assurance that we are right with God. He loves us, he accepts us, he forgives us. And with that assurance, then we can begin to apply that to ourselves. And we can start to unravel the resentments that we have in our heart. We can start to unravel the brokenness in our relationships. We can start to unravel the mistakes that we made and own those mistakes without fear of being punished, without fear of being rejected. And the alleviation of the fear allows us to see things differently, to say, oh yeah, I was doing it that way is not working for me. I can own that and change, and I can do it this way, and this way is working for me. This way is improving my life. This way is improving my family life, my relationship life, my work life. And we can begin to make those changes because he has alleviated all of the problems that these things stem from, which is rejection by God, fear of condemnation, fear of rejection, fear of torment, torture, all these horrible, scary things that were invented along the way to try to control people and, keep them under the thumb, and all this stuff that, government and religion and all this came up with. No, Jesus wiped all of that clean. So Jesus fixed the problem, and that is the gospel. And the gospel, if you're not familiar with this word gospel, it's kind of a religious word, but it's kind of like just squeezed together two words, God spell, but it means literally good news. Like that, after Jesus rose from the dead, forgave all the sins, set everybody free, gave them this new power of love and forgiveness and acceptance, and it just spread everywhere. They would go around and they would be like, hey, have you heard the good news? The gospel is the good news. Well, the good news is that he wiped the slate clean for everyone. And it's only good news if he wiped the slate clean for everyone. Because if he didn't wipe the slate clean for everyone, that's not good news. If God tortures people in hell, that is not good news. That's the worst possible news. There's no way, there's no definition, there's no way it could have caught on to call torturing people in hell good news. And the Christians who are preaching that today have been tricked, deceived. They're still under the power of the Roman Empire, the Fifth Church Council, to go around telling, well, yes, you're going to be tortured forever and ever unless you join our shtick. And now there's 40,000 different varieties of shtick. God doesn't love you, accept you, and forgive you unless fill in the blank. Which fill in the blank, damn it? I need to know. Is it just luck of the draw? Oh man, I got the lucky ticket. I was the lucky denomination. I was born in the right place at the right time, surrounded by the right information, and I responded in the right way, and thank goodness I'm not going to be tortured and everyone else is. That's horrible news. That's luck of the draw. And then how could it possibly be heaven for anyone? It makes no sense. How could it possibly be heaven to be up there knowing that people that you love are not there? They're down there being tortured. If somebody I loved was being tortured somewhere, there's nothing that could stop me from doing something about that. I'm going to devote every ounce of energy, time, resources I have to stop that from happening. I couldn't just be up in heaven like, well, I made it to heaven. Those poor suckers, they should have followed my path and I wish they got the lucky ticket, or well, they should have believed, or they should have repented, or they should have this, or they should have that. That's not heaven. That is not good news. That is bad news. So that's false right there, because it doesn't even meet the definition of good news. That's bad news, so it's not true. The good news is, the gospel is, the basic gospel. This is it from the beginning. Jesus resurrected from the dead after being crucified unfairly to wipe the slate clean for every single person. There's nothing between us and God. God gives full love, acceptance, and forgiveness to every single person on planet Earth. And now we can begin to apply that good news to our life to unravel the pain and the suffering that we experience down here. It's not some future solution. Future's taken care of. It's a right now solution that we can begin to experience this new law that Jesus implemented, the law of love. And that, my friends, is the gospel of Jesus Christ, plain and simple. Hey, thanks for tuning in today. Like and share, and we'll have more content for you in the future.